Most gardeners don't kill their potted earthworms with neglect, they kill them with temperature swings. They soak a container in cool morning water after it's been baking in the sun, or they move a worm bin from a shaded shed into direct heat, or they top a pot with fresh hot compost without checking internal temperature. That rapid thermal shift, honestly, stresses worms faster than starvation ever will, and when worms crash, your soil biology crashes right behind them. If you're serious about living soil in containers, subscribe now because this channel is about preventing quiet mistakes that cost you yield. Worms are not decorations in your pots, they're biological engines. When you disrupt their temperature stability, you're shutting down nutrient cycling, whether you realize it or not. Let's be clear about what thermal shift actually means in a potted system. Earthworms, especially composting species like red wigglers, function best between about 55 and 77 degrees Fahrenheit. They can survive short dips into the low 40s and spikes into the mid-80s, but survival is not productivity. In containers, temperatures change far faster than in-ground beds. A 10-gallon fabric pot sitting in full sun can swing from 60 degrees in the morning to 95 at the core by late afternoon. That is not a gentle fluctuation. That's shock. And here's where most people get it wrong without realizing it. They water at noon with cold hose water that's been sitting underground. That water might be 50 degrees. When it hits soil that's 90 degrees internally, you create a 40-degree drop in localized zones. Worms don't migrate fast enough to escape that shock pocket. Repeated stress like that causes them to burrow deeper, stop feeding, or die off gradually. You won't see a pile of dead worms. You'll just notice your castings production slows and your soil starts compacting. You know, I learned this the hard way running side-by-side tomato containers on a south-facing patio, same soil mix, same feeding schedule, and I introduced the same worm population at about 1 pound per 8 cubic feet of soil. One group was watered early in the morning before the heat really built up. The other was watered mid-afternoon after full sun exposure. Within about 3 weeks, the afternoon-watered pots showed reduced worm activity and, honestly, poorer top growth. The difference wasn't fertilizer. It was thermal stability. You need to start thinking of temperature as a management input, not just background noise. In raised beds, soil mass helps buffer temperature swings, but in pots, you are the buffer. That means shading strategies, watering timing, and even the color of your container really matter. Black plastic pots, for example, absorb and radiate heat aggressively. If you're serious about worms in containers, switch to fabric pots or lighter-colored containers, or at least shield the sides with some kind of reflective barrier. Now let's talk compost additions because this is another hidden killer. People love adding fresh compost to pots as a top dressing, and that's fine if it's finished and stable, but if your compost core is still running at 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and you shovel that into a container, you've just created a localized heat spike. I monitor my compost piles with the RioTemp heavy-duty compost thermometer, the 36-inch stem model. It gives me true core temperature, not those surface readings that can really lie. If the pile is above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, it does not go anywhere near worm-inhabited containers. The link is in the description if you want a durable probe. It's not just a casual gardening tool, it's built for real compost management. In my system, finished compost going into wormed containers must sit below 85 degrees Fahrenheit consistently for several days. I check multiple spots. I don't guess by touch. Your hand is not calibrated. Another mistake that looks harmless is relocating worm pots without acclimation. If your worm-rich container has been living in a shaded greenhouse at 70 degrees Fahrenheit average and you move it directly outdoors where daytime temps hit 90 degrees, you've created a macro-level thermal shift. Worms regulate through the soil moisture and temperature gradient. They need time to adjust. When I move containers seasonally, I transition them over 3 to 5 days. 2 hours of exposure the first day, then back to shade. 4 hours the second day. Gradual increase. It's basic acclimation, but almost nobody does it. Hydroponic growers who integrate vermicompost teas into reservoir systems make a similar mistake. They brew tea at one temperature and dump it into a cooler reservoir without equalizing. Microbial life experiences shock just like worms do. If your tea is 75 degrees and your reservoir is 60 degrees, let them equilibrate before mixing. Biology is temperature sensitive, always has been. Let's get practical about prevention inside small backyard systems. If you're running a 15-gallon container with integrated worms for peppers or eggplant, keep soil moisture around 60 to 70% of field capacity. Dry soil heats faster. Consistent moisture buffers temperature spikes. I water either at sunrise or just after sunset, never at peak heat. If daytime highs exceed 90 degrees Fahrenheit regularly, I use a 30% shade cloth during the hottest hours. That alone can reduce internal soil temps by 8 to 12 degrees. Mulch is, honestly, non-negotiable. A 2-inch layer of shredded leaf mulch or partially finished compost on top slows surface heating dramatically. In one of my trials, I found that identical containers with and without mulch showed a 10-degree difference at 2 inches depth during the afternoon heat. You also need to understand that worm density influences thermal resilience. Overcrowded worm populations generate metabolic heat. In a confined container, that can raise internal temperatures subtly, but consistently. I limit worm additions to about half a pound per 5 gallons of active soil mix. More is not better. More increases oxygen demand and heat production. There's another unpopular truth here. Not every container should have worms. Small pots under 5 gallons are simply too volatile in temperature unless they are heavily shaded and insulated. If you're growing herbs in 1-gallon nursery pots on a sunny balcony, worms are not the right biological tool there. Use compost extracts instead. Save live worm integration for larger, thermally stable volumes. If you suspect thermal stress already happened, look for behavioral signals. Worms clustering near the bottom drainage zone is often a sign the upper layers overheated. A sour smell combined with reduced casting production suggests microbial imbalance following worm decline. In that case, stop feeding, stabilize temperature, and allow the system to rebalance before adding any amendments. One more correction that needs to be said clearly. Spraying cold water to cool down hot soil is not a solution. It's another shock. Gradual cooling through shade and moisture retention is far safer than rapid drenching. When you treat container soil like living infrastructure instead of inert media, these details matter. Temperature stability is the foundation of worm survival, and worm survival is the foundation of nutrient cycling in potted systems. The difference between a struggling container garden and a productive one is often invisible. It's not the brand of fertilizer, it's not the seed variety, it's whether the biology is functioning consistently, and biology hates sudden shifts. If this helped you rethink how you manage worms in pots, subscribe to the channel. Share this with another grower who keeps wondering why their worm bin works but their potted worms disappear. Growing better food isn't about adding more inputs, it's about understanding the systems that are already working for you and protecting them.